Hello, everyone. I encourage you all to please find a seat if you haven't done so already. Hello and welcome to the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. I'm Jessie Mayer. I'm the Donor Engagement Coordinator here at the museum, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the third annual New York Jewish Book Festival. Thank you for joining us for It's Bashert, Jewish Love and Romance, featuring authors Rosen, Hannah Reynolds, and Hannah Orenstein, and moderated by Lior Zaltzman. We hope you'll explore some of the 17 panels that are happening throughout the museum today, meet some of the 56 speakers, attend one of our 3 writing workshops, and get books signed at some of the 18 author signings. We also hope you'll join us for Gersuite, a concert by Marcin Masecki and Ger Mandolin Orchestra at 6 p.m. in Safra Hall on the first floor. While you're here, we also encourage you to visit our exhibitions in our Café Locks on the second floor. The whole museum is open to you today. You can also pick up holiday gifts at the Pickman Museum shop and purchase the books discussed today through McNally Jackson in our first floor lobby. This program is made possible in part by support from the Battery Park City Authority. Your donations also help us present programs like these. And now I'm pleased to introduce our speakers. Rosen is the author of Alternate Endings and Recipe for Second Chances. She's a best-selling author of both cookbooks and novels, and is the Emmy and James Beard Award-nominated host of Potluck with Rosen on NYC Life. Hannah Reynolds is the author of Summer Nights and Meteorites. She is the 2-time Sidney Taylor Honor author of young adult romantic comedies. Hannah Orenstein is the author of Meant to Be Mine. She's the deputy editor of Lifestyle and Wellness at Bustle. Lior Zaltzman is a writer, cartoonist, and the deputy managing editor of Kveller, where she writes about Jewish pop culture, lifestyle, and current events. Thank you again for joining us today, and I'm going to hand things over to our speakers.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I am so excited, and thank you so much for these introductions. That way we can get straight to the questions.
We need more chairs. People want happy things.
I know. Oh, my gosh. Thank you all for being here. I had a line where I was like, no matter what is going on outside, even outside this room, we can guarantee you'll find a happy ending here. And that is definitely something we need right now. Sorry, that was a little cheesy, but I had to. All right, so I'm going to start with a question for everyone. So romance novels are obviously a big thing right now. Have gotten much bigger in the last few years and so much more mainstream than ever before. And I would love for you to talk about a little bit about how you relate to this genre and how your books relate to it. Hannah Reynolds, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. Hi. Thanks everybody for coming. So I write young adult romances, but I always read romance novels. And the first books I ever wrote were some Harlequins when I was 22 years old. And I think I just sort of wanted to write about myself, honestly. I wasn't thinking about writing Jewish romance or anything. I just wanted to write a character that reflected my world, which was at the time here in New York City. And so then the response that I got from those 3 books was so surprising to me because so many other people wrote in and they said that this was in 2013, they hadn't seen themselves depicted in Jewish romances before, or in romance before. And so that made me very aware of how lacking that was and how important it was to people. And so then when I switched to young adult novels several years ago, I obviously knew I wanted to continue doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I came to it really as a depressed person in COVID. I wrote cookbooks. As I was so lovely introduced. But yeah, during COVID, I was looking. I wanted to write happy stories, and I am just a person who only consumes romance and rom-coms. I have no interest in Severance and Game of Thrones and Misery. I mainline romance across any medium, and I just started writing and couldn't stop. It just brought me so much joy to write it, as much joy as I had read it. And then it was just so fascinating to me to see how much the Jewishness of writers and of people in our community, especially in the last year, was so unbelievably important to people to see themselves represented, and not just in darker literature, but also happily in romance and kind of not even central to the plot. Just here we are existing as people in the world. So it's become more, in my first novel, the main character was going to be Israeli, and I had a number of people who were like, don't do that. And so he's not. He's just like generic, his parents are immigrants, but we don't ever talk about why. And in my upcoming book, I was like, no, they're gonna have Shabbat dinner. Like we're doing this. So I think that representation is so much more important than ever, especially in stories where we're just living.
Yeah. I sort of fell into it. I knew that I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't know that I wanted to write fiction until I sort of fell into this awkward job that I was completely unqualified for, which was working as a matchmaker for a dating service. And I was 21. I had no idea what I was doing. I was trying to set up people in their 30s and 40s and help them get married. And I was a college kid. And I left that job and I was like, oh, this is a book. Like, I have to try writing a book. And a lot of my clients were Jewish. I was primarily setting up Jewish people who were looking for other Jewish partners. And it didn't occur to me that the protagonist wouldn't be Jewish as well, because that was my experience. And it was just so central to what I was doing in my work there, in my terrible work. Not one single couple got married.
Great
or
job.
Engaged or dated long term. But yeah, so I mean, I just sort of fell into it, and I loved the response from people who were like, oh, no, I really appreciated seeing a Jewish person represented or a Jewish young woman represented in that way. And as I kept writing, the characters continued to be Jewish, and at one point it occurred to me, like, oh, like, is this sort of like putting me in a box or in a corner or a niche, or are people maybe, not going to pick this up, as anti-Semitism did, begin to increase over the past couple of years. But one thing that really heartened me with my past book, Meant to Be Mine, was that it's my most explicitly Jewish. There is a Rosh Hashanah dinner, there's a Jewish funeral, there's a lot of like very explicit Jewishness on the page, that I was excited and proud to write. And I got a lot of people saying, oh, like my Chinese grandmother is just like the Jewish grandmother in the book, or my Mexican grandmother, my Italian grandmother. And so these things that felt very niche to me were actually quite universal, which was really lovely to see.
Yeah, it's true. There's like universality to the specificity like that you found there. And I really recommend playing with matches. It also like so gets the world of dating in New York City. And yeah, we were just talking about like how nice this panel is a reprieve for us, and I hope it is for you too. What are the Jewish romances that you grew up with and kind of shaped your perception of Jewish romance? Maybe Hannah Orenstein.
Sure.
I love that we have two Hannahs in this panel.
Very Jewish.
It's like Hebrew school. Hannah O, please go first.
Yes, exactly. I didn't grow up reading a lot of Jewish romance, and it's not because I didn't want it. It just never came across, my desk as a child. But my favorite love stories were my parents and my grandparents, and so there's actually a lot of references that only me and people who know me would get woven into the books. Like my parents met at the matzah ball, the very first one in 1987 on Christmas Eve. And my sister actually also met her boyfriend on Christmas Eve, and so there's little references. My character meets her match on flight 1224 on a plane. So little things like that.
I was in Fiddler on the Roof 4 times, so to me that is the most. That is the Jewish romance that shaped my life. And it's also been interesting because I think at various younger stages, I wanted to be different daughters in that genre. It's like, do you want to be Tzeitel and have the like friends to lovers? Like, do you want to be the like bad Chava and like go off, whatever? Do you want to be Huddle and sort of go off with your political man? And now it's like, oh, but Tevye and Golda are pretty great. So I think that Fiddler on the Roof has something for everyone in romance.
The distillation of all romance genres
and all Jewish really, it's so I don't know. When I saw this question, I was like, it actually is really like, it's not it's a tragedy in a lot of ways, but it contains so much Jewish romance. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Fiddler on the Roof.
Nice. I like that. I also didn't read very many, but I read a lot of Jewish authors like Julia Quinn, so I read all the Bridgerton books. And so for me, I was like, well, this is nice. But you really couldn't find very many. In YA, I read a lot of Meg Cabot, who wrote The Princess Diaries, and her love interest, Michael, is Jewish. So that was like sort of as close as we could sort of get, even if the protagonist wasn't. And I was also going to say my own parents, I think. And my grandparents met on the subway here, and he asked her, he was German and she was French. They were both immigrants. And he was like, "Are you Jewish?" And she was a very secular French Jew, and she didn't know how to answer. And he said, "Well, you look like 10 synagogues." A very strange thing to say to somebody. Anyway, she didn't like him, and then she did. So.
That's amazing.
Yeah, not the best, like
Not a great
from a
line.
romance perspective, from an author's perspective.
You gotta
Brilliant.
use that.
It's funny. My husband and I also met on 12/24. So no, at a Jewish Christmas party. Speaking of that, like, can you talk a little bit more about the evolution of? Oh yes, I'm gonna try to project more.
Yeah, we're all like,
all right. All right. Back to my question. Your books have from the beginning, have had so much Jewish representation, casual, non-casual. Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of making books that get more explicitly Jewish as you go along?
Yeah. I mean, again, it wasn't even a conscious choice, really, at first. I just wanted to write about a character whose life reflected my own, and especially because my first book was a fictionalized version of this real time in my life. And, I'm not religious. I have loved ones who are religious. I think it's really beautiful. But for me, Judaism is about family and culture and food and tradition and just a way of life. And so that's always what's been at the core of my books. And so my books have really strong family relationships. Holidays are a big part of it. Food is a big part of it. And as I mentioned, my most recent book that came out, Meant to Be Mine, it's about a woman who knows the exact day she'll meet the love of her life based on a prophecy from her very eccentric, very Jewish grandmother, Bashert. And that's the book where I decided, this is going to be my most explicitly Jewish. And I've enjoyed playing around with different expressions of Judaism. And so in my next book, Main Characters, which is up there are two half-sisters who are raised very differently. And one is, for example, there are a lot of people out there. She's born in the Upper West Side. She's Jewish, but she knows how to make a really good lobster. And I've had fun playing around with a lot of different expressions of Judaism.
It's like my life.
It's like my life.
Yeah, I know. I'm like,
I'm sure a lot of people in this room can relate.
Yeah, exactly.
Allie, tell me a little bit about your journey from cookbooks to romance and how similar are these two kind of very...
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's really lucky to work in sort of two fields that bring people joy. I mean, food, so much of food is people's break. It's their happiness. It's their downtime. And it's the same with romance novels. And I think romance was always, I've worked in food. I mean, my show is in its 16th season. I mean, most of my work has been around showcasing New York and chefs and makers and people in New York. And but I have really loved that the Jewish food community of New York has always been really strong. And in recent years, if you don't subscribe to the Jewish Food Society's newsletter, you really should, because it's a delight. And I think finding that community is a big piece of both. And I think also I'm yet to read a Jewish romance novel that does not include a lot of food, because it is just such a huge part of our culture. So it's been interesting because I'm straddling two worlds. And I definitely had people when I was writing where they're like, "Oh, are you going to have a separate social media page, for cookbook author versus fiction?" And I was like, I don't have the emotional energy for that, so no. But it also, the overlap is like, there are very few people who are like, well, I love romance, but I have no interest in food, or vice versa. So it's actually been really lovely to kind of bring these two communities together, because they have, it's kind of like what you were saying about like the overlaps. It's like, it's just such a joy, and it's been such a joy to exist as a Jewish person in a public space in recent times, because I feel like just by existing and being open about who we are is powerful. Like we were talking before this about how I've gone to a lot of like romance book festivals, and I've been amazed with the last name Rosen. I'm very obviously Jewish, even if someone has not read my books, and the number of readers who come up to me and are like, "Hi, a Jewish author, like the world is what it is, and it's so nice to be around you." So I don't know, it's been very special in the romance space, which I think didn't have as much of a sort of Jewish community around it as the food space, which has always had kind of restaurants to go to and places that are so explicitly Jewish. So yeah, it's been really lovely to kind of be a part of romance growing in its Jewishness in this time period. So yeah, it's been lovely.
Yes, we're having a Jewish romance renaissance.
Yeah.
Hannah R. I love that you're here with a young adult representation. Can you talk a little bit about why it's important to write Jewish love stories in this genre and how you kind of ended up writing in the genre?
Oh, yeah, for sure. But first I wanted to say I would like a master list of all food in Jewish romances.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's so much food. I think when you were saying that, I was
Yes.
like, oh my God, all I want to do is write about food and eat it.
Yeah.
So,
There's a recipe in mine.
yeah. Oh.
My grandma's
nice.
chicken soup recipe is the last page of my book.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a great one.
It's been, I mean, and it's funny because I feel like, I mean, my books all have recipes for more obvious reasons, but I feel like when I've read, like Lindsay Hammeroff's books, which I love, which are also a lot about food, I mean, she has recipes in the back. So it's
Oh, yeah.
it really does seem to be this common thread in Jewish romances in a way that, you know, perhaps doesn't exist otherwise. Like if you're reading a Jewish romance, you will find food in it.
Yeah.
Like, it will be there.
And it's so interesting. It's a way for Jewish women to connect, I feel like has always been.
Yeah,
Like
food.
cooking,
Yes.
eating.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And if you haven't read Amanda Elliott, she's Jewish romances that are also
Yes.
foodie romances.
Love you a
So
lot,
just
Guy.
a little pitch. but so YA. Yeah. So I started writing when I was a teenager. So I think I was just like very naturally writing about my own age. And then, you know, I went to school for it and then I kept writing. And then writing about YA is so fun because when you're a teenager, you feel everything so strongly. And it's the first time for so much stuff. Like maybe it's your first crush, your first love, your first kiss. Like everything feels very like life or death too. You can write a contemporary novel and the stakes can feel like you're in like the end of the world. And it doesn't have to be. It can just be like fun and fluffy. But like if that boy doesn't like me back, we're all done. So I think that's what makes it so fun to write and to read, even for older readers too. But I also think it's deeply important because we lose a lot of readers if they aren't engaged their whole life. So I think that, you know, we have a lot of children's books, we have a lot of adult novels. We didn't actually used to have any adult novels with Jewish characters, but like happy ones, I mean.
Yeah. Romance novels.
We've always
yeah.
had books.
But my second book, 8 Nights of Flirting, is a Hanukkah romance, and there just weren't any, even though you can find Hanukkah picture books. And, you know, I think everyone here probably knows Hanukkah is not like that big a holiday, but like there was just nothing, and there was certainly nothing about Passover, about Rosh Hashanah or anything. So I think that we don't want there to be a cliff, basically, for readers where they're reading and then there's just nothing that represents them, and so they stop reading. And this isn't just, of course, for Jewish readers, it's for like any marginalized readers. You need to be able to see yourself in literature, or you're just sort of, you might be out. So I think
That's such a salient point, though, because that's also an age where a lot of people kind of lose their connection to
Yeah.
Judaism if they grow up feeling maybe antagonized by it. And so you're finding a way to tell stories that kind of meet them where they are. Which
I
love.
think also like a lot of times like you're learning about family for the first time. In one of my books, she does like big genealogy research because I think maybe before then you're not as interested or you're not looking outside yourself as much. But then I think as a teenager, you often start to get really curious.
That's true. Yeah, there's a big debate about if Hanukkah. We're going to get back to Hanukkah. The idea of Bashert, and speaking of drama and like big dramatic ideas, and which is in the title of this panel, is a big part of your book. It's just the Yiddish word for destiny, a person who's just meant for you, and I think a big concept in romance in general that there's this kind of perfect person, idealized person meant for you. Why did you want to explore that idea in your book, and especially in like Jewish context?
Yeah. Well, I got to use the word Bashert in a book, which to use Yiddish in a mainstream novel was something I was excited to do. There's a lot of Yiddish in the book. But I started writing the book April 1st, 2020, which, as you guys remember, was a super fun time. Great day. And, you know, as, of course, all of us were flailing and really uncertain about what the future was going to look like. I had just gone through a really big breakup, and this was the person that I thought I was going to marry, and there was suddenly so much in my life that felt so out of my control. And I was really attracted to this idea of, well, what if you did have control, and what if you knew exactly when good things were going to happen? And so that's what led me to this idea of Bashert. But also, a big part of this book is the relationship between Edie, the main character, and her grandmother. And I think we all had this thing during the early days of the pandemic, at least, where we were like, if I can just do this one thing, it's going to be okay. Like, this is my light at the end of the tunnel, whether it was traveling or, getting married. A lot of people pushed back their wedding. And for me, it was I wanted to go hug my grandparents. I wanted to fly to Florida and give my grandparents a hug. And they both died in November 2020. And so to be able to celebrate that relationship and put it in the book was something that was really special to me. And they were together for 65 years. And to be able to write about those kind of lifelong loves was really meaningful. Sorry to bring the mood down. You guys look so sad.
This is supposed to be the happy panel.
They're together again. They had a wonderful, wonderful life together.
It's so sad, but it's so beautiful, and it's so true that our relation, a lot of these books are odes to Jewish family. A lot of the best Jewish romance novels are that, and also just this idea of this great love that it's a lot of weight on our shoulders too, of trying to find that great love of our grandparents and our parents. And I love the way, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I love the way the book juggles that idea.
Thank you.
Ali, your next book is your first Jewish romance, explicitly Jewish romance. I love that with a Jewish protagonist, and I love the way Nora's Jewish identity kind of is casually a part of who she is. Why? Tell me a little bit about the reasoning behind that choice.
Yeah, I'm sorry I know, I'm like, and now we'll get into all the depressing things to talk about romance. No, my husband is Israeli, and we lost a family member on October 7th, and it angered me how little there was that we could do from here, and as I was writing this book, I had sort of found myself doing kind of the similar things I'd done in my last books of because I write in first person, it's always been important to me that, especially first person from a woman's perspective, that any woman can sort of put herself in with the main character, right? And so my priority in other books had been, I don't want to identify her race, what she looks like that's always been for me, because I really enjoy that in a book. When I'm reading a first person book, I like to put myself in there. And I had sort of thought that was of value. And as I was writing and just feeling I don't know, the world. So she had these Friday night dinners with her family, and she has kind of, certainly if you were Jewish, you would recognize her parents. There are a certain brand of Jewish parents, and I just, at a certain point, I was like, no, she's going to be Jewish. Her name is Nora. She's Jewish, and I don't know. And I mean, I'm very lucky that my editors and people, not a single person was like, this is interesting that you've changed this about this book, but. It's just, I don't know, it felt deeply important because I have enjoyed so much of the books that have that representation. It felt very important for her to be Jewish and be explicitly Jewish on the page, even though it's not the story does not revolve around a holiday or a thing where we would need to make that so obvious. But it just seemed like in this moment, it is very important for readers outside the Jewish bubble, because I think we all, it's we're all talking to each other and we're all seeing content and we're all reading websites like Kveller and we see what's happening, and then you talk to your non-Jewish friends and they're like, oh my God, I had no idea all this anti-Semitism was happening and all this stuff, and you're like, yeah, because you're not reading about it. So I think just existing as Jewish is so important, and I think that it's amazing. I love Jean Meltzer's books. I love the books that are so explicitly Jewish, but I think it's also important to just have living while Jewish in books. So it was very important to me.
I told myself I wasn't going to cry at the Jewish romance. No, that's true. That's a lot of our lived experiences. We're casually Jewish most of the time, and then not me. I work for Kveller, so I'm Jewish 20%. But most of us.
But it's one piece of us, and it doesn't have to define us. It defines us in some parts of us, but I think I think it's important to show, as you were saying about with any, sort of casual mentions of people's culture, it doesn't have to be the thing driving the plot. It can just be who someone is, and I think that's valuable as well.
Yeah. An Unlikely Story is very comforting and joyful. So, yes, all these books actually are very comforting and joyful. It was so nice to be able to immerse myself in all your work. Let's get back to Hanukkah.
Very timely.
Woohoo. What about Hanukkah is so romantic? What made you want to? I mean, I know.
Okay, well, to be perfectly honest, it was just that I watch and I've read so many Christmas movies, and they're great, they're charming. But you watch a couple too many, and then you're like, are there no Jews in this town? You're like not one.
Not even a side character.
I'm not even the token best friend. So I think that I always wanted to do like a holiday romance. I think they're fun, they're festive. I really enjoy reading and watching them myself. Obviously, I was not going to write a Christmas one, so I wrote a Hanukkah one, and it was really just, I always loved Hanukkah. I also very much would say Passover is probably my favorite holiday, but Hanukkah's so chill. At least in my family, it was very chill because it was just like laid back. There was nothing really. You were just like hanging out and eating food. And the family aspect was so big. And the other thing is, of course, it very nicely aligns with winter break, perhaps, in the secular world. Which
and
is
this
what my
year,
characters
too.
are. And this year,
especially,
very
yeah.
particularly. And so I just wanted to I'm from New England. We go very hard on winter. And so I think I just wanted to get to like dive into that and sort of like do all the really fun stuff, but have it be, my culture. And it is very intertwined. This book, the love interest celebrates Christmas. So they're doing a lot of both customs because I thought that was fun. I was into it. So.
It's such a great cozy romance to keep you.
I just wanted to like write something like very cozy. I wrote it in 2020 and I was very lonely because I was not hanging out with any of my friends. And I just wanted it to be about like friendship and family and being together and sort of like Huga, which I was lighting a lot of candles at the time.
Yeah, and every year, more than before, I feel like we get more and more Hanukkah romances. Maybe we can talk about them later as recommendations. But and also 2 new Hanukkah Hallmark movies if you want to learn more about them. I'm happy to chat later. Okay, I think we have to talk about the biggest Jewish romance story of the year, which is not actually a book, but is actually a TV show. Yes. Nobody wants this. Feelings, thoughts, concerns. Who wants to start?
Who wants to delve into this? I'll say the positives, which is Adam Brody's hot, and
hot.
having a rabbi as like a character that everyone is lusting over. I enjoyed. I also thought Esther, like the sister, everyone was like, she's so hateable. I was like, really? Because I want to be her friend. I think she's so, and she's like very ride or die for her. Like, of course she hates this girl. Like, her best friend is sad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Her
So
best friend, her ex just moved on in the speed of light.
immediately. Yeah. Like, can you imagine if that happened to your best friend? So I don't know. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I also come from an interfaith family. My mother is a blonde New England Republican Christian, and my dad is a Southern Jewish Democrat, and so I am very comfortable with differing opinions. And yeah, which is, so I don't know, I felt a little represented as an interfaith family and all the complications that come with that. But yes, I think there was a little bit of self-hating in it, if anyone wants to take the negatives.
And I think, did you watch it? Okay. And the context, if anybody hasn't watched the show, I think is...
Has anyone not watched this show?
yeah.
Raise your hands. Okay,
It's so few.
So most people know, but like one of the conversations is simply that a lot of the representations of like Jewish womanhood are not ideal. So I watched the first like 3 or 4 episodes, and I was actually so like slightly uncomfortable. Sometimes I also get a little uncomfortable, I think, when I'm seeing Jewish representation and I'm not sure if it's for Jews or if it's for like a wider bracket. And I'm sort of like, is this for me? And I wasn't sure I actually felt like it was, even though I think the showrunners meant it to be. But I think I was just like, mostly I was like, Brody's hot, and that's it, and I'm out.
Yeah.
So.
I will add to this conversation by saying Adam Brody is hot.
We all have to say it.
We do have to say it, but no, I watched it in one afternoon. I loved it, but I also hated that I loved it at the same time because so many of the Jewish characters were unbearable to watch. Like, they were so harsh and so poorly drawn. And as much as I loved the show, I was disappointed that the showrunner did an interview. I think it was with Hey Alma. Is that right?
No, but she did an interview.
She was
and we quoted it in Hey Alma, but it was with another publication. I can't remember.
It was somewhere. I don't know. And somebody basically said, like, hey, like, Jewish women are not thrilled with this. What do you think? And she was very defensive about it. And I thought that wasn't a great
She's like, I didn't think about
moment.
it. I wasn't thinking about it.
I wasn't thinking about it.
It was not a thought in my head.
She's
is
married. She married and she converted.
She's Jewish, yeah. Yes, and it's about her story. It's her love story. It's streaming on Netflix, so I would assume it is not meant for a Jewish audience. But I did have a wonderful conversation with Jackie Tone, who plays Esther, and she is so deeply thoughtful about Jewish representation. And hopefully, it was renewed for a second season, if you didn't know, and hopefully there will be more kind of authentic Jewish women representation then. In the meantime, Emily Arlick, who plays Rebecca, is in a Jewish Hallmark movie that I really enjoyed, and she gets her happy ending. So that's Rebecca was Adam Brody's hot rabbi ex-girlfriend, crazy Jewish ex-girlfriend. A trope I detest. So I hear y'all.
Not that you have opinions on this
No.
either.
No, it's not like I've written like maybe 10 pieces about it. Okay, back to downers. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges in being Jewish in the romance novel sphere, in your experience or opinion, or in things that you've seen? Or maybe we can say there aren't any.
I'll actually be positive. I think like the YA space, which has its own separate challenges, has actually like very supportive. I have not actually encountered that many anything, right? Everyone seems just like psyched. I'll say the one sad thing is that like my first book, which is The Summer of Lost Letters, and has sort of like a World War II backstory where, if you guys are familiar with kinder transport, there was also something called American kinder transport, and it deals with that a lot as the backstory. That did really, really well. And then my like Jewish Hanukkah book did a lot less well, and I was just like, oh, people want to read about World War II.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. But I actually have only found people to be very supportive. So.
Yeah, I think it's been good and bad. I mean, it's been bad in that the number of people I've had to block on social media has been wide. The number of followers in the beginning that I don't post any political content because I don't believe that my mental health can withstand that. So I keep my Instagram is like my dog, my kids, my cooking, and my romance books. Like, it's pretty. But I mean, when I post like it's Rosh Hashanah, and I would like lose 100 followers, I'd be like, cool, okay, this is where we are in the world. I would also say Jewish adult romance has really had a rough time. I mean, we had a big festival, Steamy Lit, which celebrates diversity in romance, that banished a Jewish author, and then did not banish authors that said things basically asking Jewish people to not be alive anymore, and those people were not banned, and that has been really stuff like that is hard. There is a audiobook narrator who recently, I'm not going to repeat what he said, but he not only was he sort of not really canceled, then when one non-Jewish author posted and said, I will not be using him anymore, and his name is Zach Weber, so if you have any of his books, please be careful with yourself as you listen to him. He does a lot of really big people, like Abby Jimenez. And anyway, a non-Jewish author posted saying, I'm not going to use him again. And then she was harassed to such a degree that she then posted the next day being like, I just have to clarify, I'm not pro-genocide. which is wild, right? So I would say that the adult romance space has been horrific and really sad to watch. But I will say that I have made closer Jewish author friends and people. I mean, the Jewish book community is so amazing, and it was not something that I think was as active before, and now the just sort of deep embrace of all Jewish authors sort of within our community has been really heartening. So it's hard to watch. I mean, and it continues to be hard to watch. And I've tried to sort of block it out as much as I can because it's so depressing. But I think it makes it more important than ever for us to support each other. It kind of makes me think of, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the meme of like Issa Rae when she was at an award show and they said, "Who are you rooting for?" And she said, "I'm rooting for everybody black," and everybody thought that was amazing. And I sort of now am in the space of like, I'm rooting for everybody Jewish, in a way that like it was it's still very important for me to write about people across diversity of romance. But I think the last year has really made me realize of like, if somebody is Jewish and they ask me to promote them and help them and do anything, like, I'm standing up, I'm showing up, I'm going to be there, because not a lot of other people are doing that for us. So we really have to, as we always have, find the joy in our culture and community and stand together.
Yeah.
Thanks.
From the applause, I know it's a very relatable experience, I think, for a lot of people, a lot of Jewish people that I know. Yeah. Oh, do you want to take it?
Yeah, hi. I haven't had a book come out since October 7th, so my experience with this has been maybe less complicated in some ways. But I will say that I think I've been very lucky. I've had one explicitly very anti-Semitic DM in my entire publishing career. One woman told me that I only got published because my dad is friends with the executives at Simon & Schuster, which is completely untrue. He sits in his office, he types on his computer, he works in software, absolutely not. Kind of a gross trope, but it did make me laugh because it was so wrong. But I will say that I think the positive side of being a Jewish author in the romance community is that other Jewish authors have been so welcoming and so supportive, especially when I was early in my career. The people who embraced me the most were other Jewish authors who would, like you said, support each other, come to events, even just, introducing me to other people, blurbing my books, inviting me on their podcasts. These are the connections that are really supportive and I think almost intrinsic in a way because, rooting for everybody Jewish. So I will say that's something that's been really lovely.
That's great. That is such a terrible comment. I'm so sorry.
I laughed.
So random.
I laughed and then I blocked them.
Yeah. The block button is our best friend.
I have a couple more fun questions. How are we on time? Are we good? You good? Okay. Okay, so some general fun romance questions. What are your favorite tropes, romance tropes? Hannah,
Jewish or not Jewish?
just general, but maybe both.
Both, yeah. Anything that's exes to lovers or enemies to lovers, I will eat it up.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be Jewish. I will just eat it up completely.
Yeah, I mean, I've written 2 second chance romance books, so you can guess. And everyone's always like, "Are you and your husband okay?" But I don't know. There's something. I love the history of it all. There's something about the tension that already exists. So yeah, to me, second chance or enemies to lover. Yeah, anything where there's just tension. I love it.
Yeah.
Hannah, you also have those.
I was going to say with enemies to lovers, but I think part of that for me is just really good banter, which isn't really a trope, but I just want dialogue that makes you laugh.
Yeah, and your books have really fun dialogue.
I make myself laugh. I don't know about other
That's
people.
the most important thing.
Yeah.
But you do make me laugh too. But yeah, I was thinking that there's something so Jewish about that trope because it's all about tshuva and redemption and it's this whole idea of Yom Kippur. Do you have any tropes that you hate?
Oh, I do. Sorry, were you going to say? I was
No.
I hate the big misunderstanding.
Oh,
which,
same.
if you read a lot of romance novels, especially in published from like the 80s through the early thousands. I would just say that at the 3/4 mark, you know, she sees the boy, he's with a girl, you know later on it's going to be his cousin, but she's mad about it. And they're in a fight, and it's for extra drama.
How are
and
they
I
keeping
hate
this
that.
misunderstanding going for so long? It's been 200 pages.
So thumbs down there.
Yeah, and I think when it's done well, like when there's a reason for, you know, but it's done so poorly so often, and it's just used as a crutch of like, I couldn't think of a legitimate reason for this, so we're just gonna break them up, and it's kind of like, so yeah,
Gotta fill a whole book.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say to me that's, and I think also my other thing, it's not a trope, but it's, I hate how much people hate. Like, I love books with really unlikable women,
Same.
and I'm amazed when I go to like give them 5 stars on Goodreads, and I'm like, everyone else hated this person. I
Hated.
love her. Yeah, it's
I
like,
thought she was funny.
yeah, I'm like, I think she's great and complicated and real and
personality.
Yeah, so I would say I hate the sort of dumbing down of female characters to sort of make them more saleable. That really bothers me.
Yes. I was going to say something else, but now I have to just jump on this. Women don't have to be perfect all the time. Sometimes they can make interesting decisions and mistakes like we all do, and that doesn't mean they're terrible people. And yeah, Goodreads it can be a cesspool. So women, it's okay. Women can be nice even if they're not nice all the time. Anyway, I would also say I really hate the like insta love trope where it's like you just like lock eyes and suddenly you're soulmates and you're falling in love. And so I kind of tried to play with that a little bit in Meant to Be Mine. So that, you know, with this idea of Bashert, okay, sure, but she's a little skeptical at first. There's a little bit to overcome, and so I had fun. I had fun playing around with that.
I love that. Yeah, I love the way you played around with it. No, again, no spoilers. You have to read it. Last one, and then we'll open up to questions. Let's all share our favorite Jewish romances of the moment.
I think anything by Rachel Lynn Solomon is fantastic. Oh, I love the like noise we just got from this. She writes such incredible banter, like we were saying. Her characters are just, they feel really full and well-rounded and relatable, and like I just want to be friends with them. It's very steamy, but like in a very hot way. And yeah, I think my favorites by her are The X Talk, which is a little bit of an enemies to lovers situation, and Weather Girl, which gets weirdly into meteorology in a way that I didn't know was interesting, but it is. And her characters are like very culturally Jewish, casually Jewish, but in a way that just feels really real.
I also love that in Weather Girl, the guy is like not conventionally attractive, which I feel like we never, like women are allowed to be like, you know, but then they still end up with like hot guys. And I love that it's like the only book I've ever read where it's like, he's not conventionally attractive, but he's the best.
Yeah, it's like within the Jewish diversity in her book, there's always so much other diversity of representation, and that's one thing that I love about her too. Ali.
Yeah, so I will say that I'm just gonna, I got to read early, the author's Ali Brady, which is 2 writers actually, and one of them is Jewish. They just wrote a Hanukkah novella called like One Night, 2 Holidays or something, and it's basically about how Hanukkah and Christmas this year are on the same day, and it's about people who get snowed in. It comes out next week, and it is so delightful. It just like made me grin. You know when you have those books where it's like you just are grinning from ear to ear. It's like so light and delightful, and it takes place in Chicago, so it's like very city. Anyway, so that Ali Brady book is great. I love You Alatka also, if we're talking about Hanukkah books. I absolutely adored that. Yeah, and I feel like Lindsay Hammeroff's upcoming book I really loved. We're so lucky. There's just so many now. It's just like so delightful.
Yeah, and I was also just going to reiterate that Love You Latka, which did just like the adult Hanukkah rom-com so well, and it was just sort of like mostly set here in New York, also a little bit in Vermont.
Yeah, it's like it's New Englandy for you.
Very New England. Yeah. And it's just like so much food is involved, and her first book I think is also just like so foodie. And I'm a vegetarian, so every so often I'm like, okay, let's take a step back. But most of the time, very delightful.
Yeah. Oh, Meredith Shore's books also I love. Are so good. Yeah, are so just like charming. Yeah.
I think I saw, is this right? Alyssa Friedlander's book is downstairs?
Yes.
Yes. Last summer at the Golden Hotel. Yes, it's so good. I sobbed, honestly, and I've told her this so many times. It's if you have any personal connection to like the golden age of the Catskills, this is for you. Please buy it. That's all I'm saying. Like, please, like, give her all your money.
Yeah, buy all her books, actually. They're all great. And
Say the name again, because
I think it's Last Summer at the Golden Hotel or something like that. Yes, Last Summer at the Golden Hotel.
Yeah, I have a lot of her. I'm really excited for Beth Kander's Made It Out of Clay is coming out. It's a golem romance, and it started out as a Hey Alma romance novel, romance movie competition. And we're in 15 minutes, which is perfect. If you do want more Rex, you can just Google my name, Kveller, and Jewish romance, and I've written very on this topic whenever I could. So questions? Sorry, you were like, okay, then you, then you.
So being into Jewish romance already feels so niche, but also it's so straight. And I would love if there are any like queer Jewish romances, or like I'm working on my book, but it's not ready yet. So who can I read in the meantime?
Seasons of Love is a fun one. There's a few. There's a few queer Jewish romances.
Michelle Mars, who's the author that was banned from the Steamy Lit Festival, has a number of queer romances, and she's someone that we should support because she's had a hard year. So definitely Michelle Mars's books.
I'd also say we have Ariel Kaplan here, who has a sapphic fantasy, so that you could add that. Dahlia Adler. Dahlia also actually runs a website where you can find a lot of queer books. And she has a tag system, so you can find them there. And Marissa Cantor also has some bi characters in her books, too, both YA.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, who was it? Daria? What was the last?
Adler.
Dahlia. Yeah.
Hi, thinking of steamy lit, how do you guys best write your like steamier scenes in a way that's not cringe, but like that like read well and are like palatable and aren't like, oh my god, what am I reading? So I feel like that's like a big challenge when it comes to writing good romance.
I have to disassociate from the fact that my father-in-law reads my books. I don't know.
I was going to say the same thing. A lot of coffee or a lot of wine, some things where I'm not like perfectly clear, just to help myself forget that people are going to read it. Write it in a frenzy, and then like a week later go back when you're a little bit more clear-headed and just edit. I used to edit all the sex scenes out of my books when I would give them to my parents because they didn't read it in book form, and they would read it like on a Word document, and then I forgot to do it one time, and they were like, what?
And then my other thing is, I would actually, if you're writing, my craft tip is I would go find books where I actually thought there were like not purple prose in the sex scenes, and I would read them, and I would like write down the phrases that I thought were actually like sensual and romantic, as opposed to just being like eye rolly. So.
Yeah, I mean, I also think there are so many, like, when I think about the scenes that like really like made me gasp a little bit, they often are not the actual sex scenes. Like I literally was just rereading this scene from The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, which I love, which it has a little bit of time travel, and there's like a moment where like he realizes that like she has just had sex with him, but like in the past and whatever. And it is like the hottest scene on earth. And they are like standing at a food cart together, you know? Like it is not, you would not, but I was like, I need to just like reread this, like get in this mindset, you know? So I think it's finding the scenes. I mean, I'm very much a bookmarker of scenes where I'm like, I liked that, you know? So I think it's being inspired by other authors and finding your own way.
All right, who's next? We're there.
Maybe this, I don't know if it's a combination of like question, comment, request, I guess, but have you put any thought into or considered like writing something bringing in 10/7? I know there's a lot. I know a friend who lost her husband not even 2 months after October 7 because he was one of the first soldiers to go in. And so I just wonder, is there a way, or have you thought about like tying in some of these like young Israeli real life stories who lost significant others on and post 10/7?
I mean, I've thought about this a lot because it's my lived experience. I contributed, I'll be on the Being Jewish Now panel later because I wrote a story about my best friend that Alternate Endings is dedicated to is no longer my best friend because she decided she wanted to date a activist. It's one of the hardest things that's ever happened in my life. I wrote my essay for On Being Jewish Now about that. I have no desire to put it in my romance on a personal level because I write for my own joy and to give joy to other people. And I think there are amazing writers that are writing about the trauma of being Jewish. And I'm never going to touch it with a 10-foot pole personally because it's not the part of my experience that I want to put in. But I think there are a lot of great writers that are writing about that. But on a personal level, like, I don't want to ruin my own joy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Come to the panel. Yeah, it's going to be a very different panel, that panel.
Yes.
As writers, it's not a Jewish or genre question per se, but what's the biggest barrier you had to getting your first book out? I mean, the writing, what was the biggest obstacle for you? And how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I had a lot of self-doubt. I didn't think that I was creative enough or smart enough or had the work ethic to actually do something like this. And the only way that I could really overcome it was I just said, okay, it's 6 months. Here is my deadline. I'm just going to do it, see if I can do it, not put pressure on myself. Let's just see if this cool thing can happen and I can actually write 80,000 words. And I used a word count tracker. So I knew 80,000 words was about the length of a novel. So I divided that by how many ever weeks are in 6 months. I'm not going to do the math now. And so every week I tried to hit that goal. And it didn't have to be perfect. I will say first drafts are bad. My first drafts are bad. I mean, everybody, I'm not to speak for everybody.
Yep.
Your first draft is going to be
You
bad.
speak
It's just
for us.
how it is. So don't critique yourself too much and just try to get to the end. Give yourself a deadline and just hit it.
Yeah.
Did you submit your books to publishers through agents at the beginning, or did you go directly?
Agents.
Yeah, you kind of have to go through agents.
And I had a slightly different path for my first books because they were with Harlequin's digital first imprint. So I actually went with them directly before signing with my agent later, who's here. But it's very unique. And so usually if you're doing something direct with a publisher, it's because they're a little bit more, innovative, or they're trying to do something less traditional. And of course, self-publishing has hugely boomed, and you don't need anything for that. But then you need to do a lot of work on your own end.
Yeah, you have to love marketing if you're going to
You have
self-publish.
to really love marketing.
And did you spend a lot of time promoting your books directly once they came out?
That's not my strong suit. I should do it more, and I really hate it. I think a lot of people really hate it. So I should have done more, and I didn't. How about you guys?
I've enjoyed some of it. I've really enjoyed going to romance conferences, and I've really enjoyed going to Jewish events. Those have been my favorites. Bookstore signings make me want to die. Because you're like, will one person show up or will 50 people show up? Let's find out. And as an anxious person, if anyone has read Recipe for Second Chances, which is a very anxious book, that is me. And yeah, so I like things like this where it feels nice. But yeah, promotion is hard for introverts who like to sit and make up things by themselves. So go to book events because authors need you.
Anyone else? Oh, yeah. Ariel?
So what Jewish holiday do you think has the most untapped romantic potential?
Love it.
I'm going to say some of the minor ones that people just don't know very much about. You notice how I'm not saying names because I don't know that much about them.
Shmini Atzeret. No, I'm just kidding.
slide that past. Because I feel like there's a lot of really interesting mythology in a lot of these where it's not quite as much celebrations of survival, but perhaps celebrations of life. And so I think that can be very good for romance.
Sukkot, only one hut.
I love that. Why? Someone write a Sukkot romance right now. So much romance underneath the stars. Guys, make it happen.
I was going to say Sukkot too, not because of one hut, though that's genius, and I wish I thought of that. But no, it just looks really cozy. You could be under the stars. Like, yeah, like somebody should do that.
I love that. All right, more questions. Yeah.
Hi, question for you guys is how, when you write a romance book, how much is based on personal experiences versus like what you would think like an ideal romance would be like versus what your actual experience is?
One thing I've heard authors say that I really love is none of it happened, everything is true. So the actual events on the page might be completely made up, but the feelings are really, really real. So my first book has 2 love interests that are like very directly inspired by people that I've dated, including the most chaotic scene I've ever written, which really happened, unfortunately. And other books have more been like, oh, I wish this person existed. This would be an amazing book boyfriend, but also like an amazing boyfriend in real life. And so I think it's really fun when you can combine traits from people that you know or experiences that you've had or feelings that you've had with sort of like what is the idealized version that would be better in real life.
I also think read an author's debut, and usually that's the closest to them, and then it's sort of, you get better at your craft, you get better, so yeah. I mean, my first book, it's really annoying because it really, it some ways mirrors my husband and I, not in all ways, but yeah, people on the internet really love that man and not the woman, and he finds that to be the funniest thing on earth. But yeah, I mean, there's always things, yeah, you said that's the perfect way to put it. There's always truth in it, but it's never, otherwise it would be a memoir.
And I would also say that almost everything except the romance is fairly, like, I draw on the mother-daughter relationship, but because I write enemies to lovers, that's not something I would ever actually want in a relationship. So those are always just totally made up, but feelings can be very real.
Yeah. Okay, we got, I think, time for a couple more questions. Anyone? Yes?
How do you think AI will impact your romance?
That's beyond my pay grade. That's a difficult question.
Yeah. I mean, the same way it's going to impact everything.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I wish I had more to say. I don't know.
Are you concerned about your ability to compete with AI?
Nope.
Do you think you will be able to sustain
I
all the interest of the public?
I will say that I work in media as well as my day job, and I will say there is one site out there that I will not name that has very clearly been using AI to write some of its stories, and you can tell. And if the same thing happens to fiction, you can tell, and it's not going to be good.
Good fiction has such unbelievable mortification and specificity that I just can't imagine a robot could do that. I mean, maybe it will, but I hope that they, help us in, sometimes it's great. It's like if you were like, okay, I was like writing a scene about like a couple that has like a koi pond and a bird bath, and I was like, I don't know anything about this. I'm going to ask ChatGPT, like, what is the filtration system of I think it can be useful in that way, but no, I think if you're using it to write, you're not a very good writer, and it'll never be specific enough. It's not human.
Yeah. Hannah, do you have any? No.
I agree.
Yeah, and also like working in media, I feel like there have been 0 conversations about using AI to write any of our stories, which are much shorter than romance novels. So, yes, in the back.
Would any of your writing say a firm romance?
Poem is fun. There are poem romances. Yes.
What are they called, and where can I read them?
I can't recall. My memory is very bad, but there are some, and I'm gonna, maybe if you want to, I can Google them later. But yeah, there should be more poem romances. Lots of masquerade dance potential.
Hijinks.
Keep buying Jewish books, and then the
There will
publishers
be
will
more holidays.
make more of
we
them.
will expand into more.
They only care about money, so if you buy them, they will make them. The end.
All right, maybe one more. Anyone else? Yeah? Last one.
Which ones feel Jewish? Is that what the question?
What elements of romance feel the most Jewish to you? That needs some deep thinking. I feel like.
Bashert, meddling families.
Yes.
Yeah. I think meddling families too. I feel like also often like a deep like academic interest.
Yeah, smart people.
Smart people.
Hot, nerdy people.
Yeah.
Accomplished women.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
like at the center, like complex. We were talking about that.
Yeah, people always say, like, as an author, you need, like, a tagline. And a friend came up with one for me that she was like, unapologetically competent women. And I was like, and that felt very Jewish to me.
Yeah, and I love that you all put such beautiful Jewish women representation. And speaking of Jewish queer romance, there's also a really beautiful representation that's not represented in our panel, but it's beautiful and complex, and I love it so much. I think, are we at time? All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. This has been so lovely. These three women are so amazing. Please buy their books if you haven't yet. And yeah, and find me at Kveller.com for more Jewish romance.